Australia is known for its expansive outback and iconic landmarks. But the country many dream of visiting can be deadly. Home to the world's most venomous spiders and snakes, ancient predators, and a lethal climate. Brave survivors tell their stories. And experts reveal what it takes to survive Australia. Most of Australia's landscape is rugged and remote. And while many are attracted to the idea of getting off the beaten track, exploring the wild can be fraught with danger.
He's 650 kilos. I ain't gonna win a tug of war.
As I lunged to him and another one trying to come up behind me.
It was terrifying because you've got no idea what's going on.
In the UK, you walk for a day, you'd end up in a pub. Out here, you can get lost so easily.
Australia is the 6th largest country in the world, more than twice the size of India, bigger than continental Europe. Yet despite all this space, the majority of the population clings to the coast, leaving vast stretches of the interior wild and uninhabited.
I think our bush and our country, we're the luckiest people in the world. To be able to go out and have a bushwalk, enjoy a sunset, enjoy a campfire is just the greatest thing to do. But having said that, we have to be aware of what the bush and the surrounds threaten us with.
We don't even know what's out there. So it's really important when we do venture out that we do so with caution.
Getting close to nature can come at a cost. Every year, thousands of Aussies end up lost, trapped, or fending off native animals as they try to tame the country's wild side. It was a tragic incident that grabbed worldwide attention.
So I just yelled out, "Has anyone got a torch? The dingo's got my baby."
In mid-August 1980, 9-week-old Azaria Chamberlain was taken from her tent by a dingo during a camping trip to Uluru in the central Australian desert.
I saw the dingo at the tent mouth coming out, obviously holding something in its mouth. It could have been nothing else but her that the dingo had.
Sadly, Azaria was never found. At the time, many Australians were in disbelief that the reclusive dingo could have taken a child. But in the years since then, dingoes have been responsible for multiple attacks, particularly in tourist areas, where the wild canines have been fed.
Dingoes are not dogs. Dingoes are a wild canine, much more closely related to a wolf than to a dog. They're incredibly resourceful. A hungry dingo is going to find food. A frightened dingo is going to stand its ground and defend its territory. The dingo isn't trying with intent to hurt anybody, but he needs to get what he needs to get from his environment. So when dingoes come into contact with humans regularly, dingoes lose their fear of humans.
Wait, get away.
Almost 40 years after Azaria's disappearance, a family camping holiday on Queensland's Fraser Island almost ended the same way.
About a bit after 12, I would have woken up to a cry. And then, I don't know exactly how long, but seconds, and his cry went from being inside the camper to outside. Luke got up, unzipped and ran out the door of the camper around the other side, and he saw that a dingo was had him by the back of the neck and was dragging him off into the bush.
14-month-old Hunter Alistair had been asleep in a camper trailer a metre off the ground when a dingo managed to undo the covering and grab him by the back of the head.
I just ran and yelled. I was running up to kick the dingo, but I didn't have to. As soon as I got from me to you away, the dingo let go of him and he cowered.
Hunter was alive, but rapidly losing blood from puncture wounds to his head. As his mum and grandmother tried to get a phone signal, Luke realised the dingoes were still a threat.
Sarah and her mother went off trying to get reception. That's when a pack of them circled me, and the way I felt, they were trying to do a sneak attack and try to pull Hunter out from behind me.
The dingo has dragged him from the camper van. Okay. We'll need an ambulance. We'll need a helicopter. The baby's dying. There's dingoes everywhere.
As I lunged to them and yelled at them, they'll back off, and there'll be another one trying to come up behind me. And yeah, it was scary.
One dingo on its own, smart, wary, he's going to stand back and wait for reinforcements. Once his pack was around him, they would have had the security and the certainty of numbers. They know the difference between one person against 50 dingoes and one person against one dingo. So a group of dingoes would be brave enough to take on almost anybody in any situation.
Fortunately, the family managed to get to the safety of their four-wheel drive and rushed to meet paramedics. Hunter suffered lacerations and a fractured skull, but made a full recovery following medical treatment.
Well, I've been to several dingo bites on the island, but not anything as severe or as traumatised for the family. It could have been much worse. I think they're really lucky on Luke's quick action.
A baby is a very similar size to an average prey animal for a dingo. So once they've worked out that the adults are not a threat to them, they can single out a little one and they could take it just like they take a young kangaroo. And our problem is whether we feed them deliberately or we just leave our scraps lying around for dingoes to take. They're increasingly associating humans as a source of food. So to make the jump from humans leave scraps at the barbecue to, oh my gosh, there's a tiny little human animal there. I'm really hungry, I could eat that, is not a big leap.
If everybody did the right thing, then they would leave you alone. They're not a pet dog. They're not a domestic animal that's cute. They're wild, and they need to be respected as a wild animal.
But for those who do find themselves facing what appears to be an aggressive dingo, there are steps to take to diffuse the situation.
Don't try and scare the dingo away. The chances are that the reason it's acting menacing is because it's being defensive, because it's afraid. So you don't want to add more fear to the situation. You also mustn't run away, because if you're running away from the dingo, you could be seen as prey. So keep facing the dingo, but don't challenge him. Don't make eye contact. Carefully back away, and you should find that the dingo's level of aggression will also subside.
You won't find dingoes in much of the expansive bushland across the country. The dense and remote forests of Australia pose risks beyond the wildlife.
It's very easy to get lost in the Australian bush, and a lot of that happens through complacency and arrogance, people thinking, I should be right, I know what I'm doing.
Korean backpacker Joo Hee Han had no idea of the dangers when she headed off on a solo hike around Mount Tyson in northern Queensland. She slipped while descending the treacherous track, tumbling down a ravine. It was several days before any of her friends realised the 25-year-old was missing, and almost a week until rescuers reached her.
The number one reason people get into trouble when they go out bush is because they go ill-prepared and they make fatal mistake of not telling anyone where they're going, when they'll be back, and they don't have a game plan if they're not.
Despite the fall, Juhi wasn't badly injured. But for 7 days, she was quite literally caught between a rock and a hard place.
Where she actually ended up was kind of down towards a crevice. The slopes came down like this, levelled out, and there was a stream of fresh water that flowed by, which thankfully, obviously, she could keep hydrated.
While she had no food, it was access to water that kept her alive.
There's a rule we use in the military and in the civilian world called the rule of threes. And that stands for 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. You need to address shelter and water as the number one things, because that's what's going to kill you faster.
Juhi was saved when her weak phone signal helped emergency crews pinpoint her location.
The only way that I would say that she actually survived that entire ordeal for 6 odd days, 7 odd days up there would be by strong will and determination.
It's not just tourists that get lost in the Aussie landscape. Even experienced locals can get into trouble fast by simply taking the wrong path.
The track disappeared and we think we followed an animal track and we just got to the wrong spot.
Cindy Bowen and Trevor Salvado had spent years exploring Victoria's high country, but losing the track meant they didn't return by nightfall, sparking a massive search operation spanning 5 days.
They like to get out and adventure out into the tracks here and that. They're usually very well prepared when they go out, so it's very out of character for them not to return though.
It's very rugged and there's a number of large gullies and crevices in boulders and things like that, which does make it really hard going for searchers here.
There's no such thing as really a sense of direction. That's sort of something that's acquired. But if you're going to go out into the bush, you need to have some sort of basic training. Certainly just knowing there's direction with the sun and the stars, basic celestial navigation, just knowing how the sun rises and things like that can help you out.
Unable to find their way back, the couple discovered continuing onwards was also perilous.
We had about a 250-foot drop in front of us. So we took a few days just to have a look at it and work out if we could get down there, and decided, yep, we'll walk out.
Just knew if we stay too much longer and they haven't found us, oh my God. So we thought, today we've got the energy, let's go.
After descending the steep bluff, the pair eventually made their way to a road where they were able to flag down a passing vehicle.
If it wasn't due to their knowledge and their skills out in the bush, they would have found it much more difficult, and they rationed their own food, and they did a really good job.
Kept calm, we kept rational. That's what helped us out.
For someone with some of those skills, a situation where you're lost in the bush mightn't be any more than inconvenient camping. But for someone that doesn't have those skills, it could be a scary life or death situation.
That was the worry when 14-year-old William Callahan disappeared in the Victorian bush. Being autistic, the teenager's verbal communication was limited, making him unlikely to respond to the 500 police and volunteers searching the tracks around Mount Disappointment.
He's very sensory oriented, so he's very much in the moment. He'll be seeking, food and shelter and warmth and comfort too.
Freezing overnight temperatures compounded the concern. At best, the teen was only dressed for a day hike.
I'm hoping he still has his clothes on. He may be barefoot though, he doesn't like shoes.
By far, the main danger of being stranded and lost in the bush is exposure from wearing incorrect clothing, not be able to keep yourself warm, and heat loss through conduction of the cold ground, heat loss through convection, which is wind chill, and heat loss through radiation. We lose 60 to 70% of our body heat through our head and our neck.
Remarkably, it may have been William's heightened sensory awareness that worked in his favour.
A child on the autism spectrum, because they're seeking certain sensory satisfaction, and in this case, in such a cold environment, William may have been seeking heat for his body, so he would have known to crouch, to curl up, to find some shelter, to keep himself warm.
For 2 days, hundreds of people scoured the mountain, and nearby property owners were urged to do anything they could to draw William out.
If they could put some water out on their veranda or outside the house, and if they have any food similar to Vegemite or feta cheese out on their veranda or porch, as William will seek that out.
It was a volunteer who finally found William.
He looked in reasonable health, you know, he wasn't shivering too bad. He didn't have socks on, so I put some socks on him and a jacket, and I gave him some chocolate.
A strong little fella, yeah. But to be out here, I don't think I'd survive that long on my own.
While William was discovered after just 2 days, 19-year-old English tourist Jamie Neal was missing for so long that he'd been given up for dead.
In the UK, you walk for a day, you'd end up in a pub. Out here, you can get lost so easily.
For 12 long days, Jamie tried to make his way out of the dense bush in the Blue Mountains, west of Sydney.
I'm an incredibly smart person with no common sense. I had overconfidence and I just didn't respect the seriousness of the situation, and I made mistakes.
Jamie had no mobile phone, no camping gear, and he was wearing light clothing, completely ill-equipped for overnight temperatures in winter.
If you're wearing cotton clothes, that sweating, your sweating will cause the cotton material, which is close to your skin, to become wet. Then during the night, you can lose your heat through to the wet clothing. A lot of people perish for that.
It got really, really cold. My feet were burning. That was the thing, I was having to move and just trying to move my toes, because I was scared I might get something like trench foot or gangrene.
But Jamie's biggest problem was no one knew he was missing. He was completely on his own, far from help.
Bush survival is really just a study of nature. All Indigenous cultures, they have a much closer relationship with the environment, all the small nuances, all the cycles, knowing how to find water, make it safe to drink, find food, being able to make fire, keep themselves warm.
Jamie wasn't able to start a fire, but he did build shelters and find water in the forest. After several days of no contact, his family raised the alarm. Hundreds of people started searching the bush from every possible angle. He did everything he could to attract the attention of rescuers, but the thick canopy of trees kept him hidden.
I just started seeing the helicopters, and that I was convinced they were out searching for me. I'd be shouting out, "Help, I'm here," and a few times when they'd left, I'd be screaming, "I'm still alive."
A week and a half had passed since he went missing. Jamie feared he would die of starvation, and even his family had given up hope of finding him alive.
I'd seen those cliffs, I'd been up in the chopper, I'd looked down on those cliffs and they terrified me. I thought, he's been wandering about in the darks and he's fallen down a cliff and smashed his brains out, and we'll never see him again.
But on the 12th day, following a police statement that there was little hope of finding him alive, Jamie stumbled across some campers who helped him walk out, malnourished, but otherwise okay.
In the future, when people might start saying it's beyond hope, we can say, well, remember Jamie Neal.
Experience has proven that planning, preparation, and packing the right stuff are the keys to surviving the wild.
I would never go out into the bush without telling someone where I was going and when I'd be back. I would make sure I have adequate warm clothing, head covering, warm layer. and socks. I'd make sure I've got some form of cutting tool, a combustion device, a covering to keep me out of the rain, some cordage and a metal cooking pot, a cooking bottle so that I can carry water and have the ability to boil it to make it safe to drink. A compass, a first aid kit and a head torch. All of those things, to me, are very, very essential things to take, and then I can sort of look after my own survivability.
But some emergencies are impossible to prepare for. Midwinter 1997, a landslide struck a remote alpine village in Australia's snowy mountains.
Just like an express train or a jet fighter going low and quickly overhead.
A desperate search for 20 people after a landslide buries 2 ski lodges in the Snowy Mountains village of Thredbo.
They can hear people calling out. Unfortunately, they can't get to them. They don't really know where they are. Doesn't look very good.
2 ski lodges collapsed, trapping ski staff while they slept.
It was terrifying because you've got no idea what's going on. There was about 8,500 tonnes that came down on top of all of us. I was on my back in bed, and by the time it had all collapsed down and moved, I had a space maybe 2 to 3 inches above my mouth, and that was it.
Entombed partway down a hillside, Stuart Diver and his wife Sally had just 90 seconds to take stock before the flow of icy water began.
Then she started screaming, and and I tried to stop the water going into her mouth, and I couldn't do it. I tried to keep myself alive because that's what humans do, but I also tried to keep the person I loved the most in the world alive.
Sally and 17 other people died in the accident, leaving Stuart buried alive and alone.
Once Sally was dead, then I had to focus on, me and my survival, and basically that's what went on for the next 65 hours. There were a couple of times there where, where I definitely thought about taking my own life to try and hyperventilate my way to unconsciousness, so hopefully the cold would take me. Probably not the smartest idea I ever had, but I tried because it just got so brutally hard. But the human mind's an amazing thing, and it just turned it around and said, no, actually, you're not ready to go.
Hundreds of rescuers were trying to reach where they thought everyone was buried, but further slippages kept forcing them back.
He could hear us working, but we couldn't hear him. Must have been absolutely horrendous for that amount of time for him to keep a will to live.
I'm thinking, how long can it take? Seriously. And then I started to think, well, maybe it's not just this building, and maybe something's happened to the whole of Thredbo, or maybe something's happened to the whole world. It wasn't until that 54-hour mark that I could hear a clear, voice from the rescuers above is when I went, hey, there we go. Someone's here, finally.
The New South Wales Fire Brigade officers called out, can anybody hear me? The words came back, I can hear you. They were the first words that we had.
Stuart had been found, but he was still far from being freed.
The next 11 hours were equally as horrific as the first 54 hours because it probably lifted me to a point of, all right, I'm out in 10 minutes. I didn't realise it was going to be another 11 hours before I got out.
We had the best of the best working there. We had engineers, we had rescuers, we had miners, we had concrete personnel. But while we were working, the whole place was moving. And there was a small hole about a fist size, and that's where you could put your arm through to reach his face. But as you were in there, and I could feel the slab move with the pressure. So because it was so unstable, that was a major challenge for everyone, and everyone put themselves at risk to get him out.
Rescue paramedic Paul Featherstone was a lifeline. He stayed with Stuart, risking his own safety in order to keep his spirits up.
The person that stopped me going mad was Feathers, 100%, and that's it. He looked after me. His only priority was not him, it was me, and he just wanted to get me out alive.
Yeah, that's the sort of area you looked at.
My focus was concentrating on his mental and physical well-being. The physical side was how much fluid do we give him, and the other thing was the mental anguish that he was going through, to try and pacify that by giving him little gifts and little things to make him feel a little better, to keep his will for him to survive.
65 hours after the devastating landslide, Stuart Diver finally saw daylight again.
Chair, there's the chair going up. They suddenly realise that they know that he's out.
Absolute roar went up from everybody that was on that site, and I dare say that the whole of Australia remembers that moment. Yeah, it sends a chill up my spine still thinking about that.
It's the one defining thing that sticks with me now. You know, it's always tinged with the sadness of losing Sally and all of the other people who were in that building. But that moment of elation was probably my one selfish bit, where that cheer was about me and about me living, and that stayed with me forever.
I think Stuart's survival came down to the fact that he was fit, he was used to that environment, he had a strong will, he'd been through hardship before, and he was determined to get out of the bad predicament he was in.
Tasmania is renowned for its dense forests. Over 1 million hectares of the small island off the southern tip of Australia is listed as World Heritage Wilderness. Surrounded by nature reserves sits the small town of Beaconsfield, where in 2006 an earthquake triggered a rockfall, trapping 2 miners a kilometre underground.
The first 15 seconds was the most horrific 15 seconds of my life.
You talk about the darkness. You know, people that have never been underground don't know what dark is. You can't move, you're covered in rock, but not knowing because of the darkness how much rock's on top of you, how much time you've got, that was probably the hardest.
The rockfall had claimed the life of their colleague, but Todd and Brant were protected by a metal cage they'd been working in, but they were far from safe. The same paramedic who had supported Stuart Diver trapped in Thredbo was also on site to help manage the challenging rescue of Todd and Brant.
Initially, Brant was unconscious, but he had his arms free. Todd was conscious but had his arms trapped, and every time he breathed in and out, the rill or the small particles of the mine that had collapsed would fill up the space his chest had just moved in. So he was slowly suffocating.
If I had been left in a position where I was,
another 10 minutes.
10 or 15 minutes.
We had fluid coming out, man, that wasn't good.
Yeah. I was vomiting contents in my stomach, I had fluid running out the side of my mouth. You know, I was slowly being crushed to death.
Brant regained consciousness quickly and was able to dig Todd out. But with 800 tonnes of rock still above them, the battle to survive had only just begun.
Oh, it had to give way. It was inevitable it was going to give way. It was just wind.
They had no food and only mine water to sustain them. For 2 long weeks, they waited for someone to come to their rescue.
About 1.5 million seconds, I can tell you that. It's a long time. You get have a car crash, what is it, 4 seconds? You think you're going to die? Go and do it 1.5 million seconds, I think you're going to die.
Probably the worst thing one can do in a situation is simply to just panic, allow that to go unfettered, allow oneself just to worry and fear about the notion I'm about to die, etc. We need to be able to try to catch those thoughts and to think, what do I need to do in this very second to be able to take action to look after myself? As hard as that is, that's often a deal breaker in terms of someone being able to survive or not.
Unsure of whether their two colleagues were still alive, mine workers were desperately trying to tunnel to where the men had been working.
It was just a horrific event, from blasting that mine, which you never blast when someone's near you. For the guy setting the charges, you can imagine the responsibility. He came out mentally scarred.
Despite every precaution, the blasts were shaking Brant and Todd's small pocket below ground in what was turning into a nerve-wracking process.
We'd hold each other's hand and just hold it so tight you'd have the white knuckles, and just not knowing that, once they press that button, that we're still going to be alive after it, We'd get through that blast, we'd give each other high fives. Yes, we got through another one. Then
you hear them coming again, you're going, oh, no.
When people are in trauma situations that do go on for many hours or even days, it tends to actually become more and more often helpless for people, because why haven't I been rescued yet? Or why haven't I got out of this situation yet? And so it can often become more and more difficult over time. What we've seen in people who can cope well in situations like that is that they just keep a lid, if you like, on how they're thinking.
Almost a week after they lost contact with the outside world, they heard another voice.
Is there anybody there? And I remember saying to Brad, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Hear what?" And I yelled back at the top of my voice. That's when the communication came back, and there was joy, excitement, enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, it was a high, all right.
It was the news everyone on the surface had been hoping for, but any celebrations would have to wait.
Because we knew that this was going to be a protracted event and was going to take time to get them out.
The men were to remain trapped for another week due to their depth and the solid rock overhead.
So these guys are probably 20 metres away, where you think 20 metres, that's nothing. Get them out, 20 metres, Yeah, 20 metres in some hard rock's not easy.
Drilling continued around the clock, inching towards Todd and Brant.
I still remember the moment as clearly, and seeing a small hole about 25 mil in diameter, and the drill still finally disappearing and looking down through the hole.
We'd put a pipe through into them where we could actually get a wire through to them which had a camera on it, a speaker, and of course a microphone, so we could hear what they were saying. We could actually see them and we could talk to them, which is a big thing, and they realise help's on the way.
While the rescue team worked out the safest way to bring the men out, Paul became their link to life above ground.
Our main role in a situation like that is to gain their confidence, and then you try and give technical advice of what is actually happening. So you're giving them feedback the whole time. They can trust you enough to tell you what's really bothering them, which is a big thing. To keep their spirits up mentally, we put in a folding mattress through this pipe so they could at least be laying on something a bit more comfortable rather than rocks where you're getting pressure areas all the time.
While food and medications were fed through the tube to sustain the duo, plans were also being put into place for when they were finally released.
We'd set up one of the rooms at 900 metres to actually put in a solar water so we could wash them down, new clothes, and to get them out on their own 2 feet. They were going to be naturally dehydrated to some extent and didn't have a lot of energy. But they wanted to come out of the mine and they wanted to tag off.
You can hear the crowd cheering now.
Here they come.
The rescue team had pulled off an incredible engineering feat, safely extracting the men from their unstable burial chamber. Todd and Brant were able to walk away seemingly unscathed.
They both supported each other in doing that, and even though they weren't well, they made out they were a lot better than what they were, and their determination and will, and their resilience to be able to do that was huge.
We are survivors, and our heroes are the guys that got us out. The guys who united us with their families, they're heroes.
By far one of the biggest threats in the Australian wild is that it is home to some of the deadliest animals on the planet. And reptiles are consistently at the top of that list.
Australia has far and away the greatest density of venomous snakes anywhere in the world. And we certainly also have the most unique venoms in the snakes here. You have some snakes causing total paralysis. You have other ones that are basically Ebola with fangs.
On average, 3,000 people are bitten every year in Australia. More than 500 end up in hospital, and at least 2 will die. The biggest culprit is the brown snake.
I wouldn't describe brown snakes as aggressive. Rather, I would describe them as very ready to defend themselves. Brown snakes don't start fights, but they end them.
While rock climbing in Western Australia, James Bush discovered their defensive nature firsthand.
A couple of metres from the top, reached up, put my hand on a hold and felt something sting, and as I pulled my hand back, a snake came with it.
Snakes need to get their energy from the sun. So finding a snake on a rock ledge in the sun is the obvious place. The downside of that, of course, is he's lying there because he's not warm enough yet. So he doesn't have the energy to get away quickly. A cool snake is going to lie there and protect himself.
What makes brown snakes such a danger is that they're the only snake in the world where death can occur within about 15 minutes. It's happened time after time, and what makes it even greater of a danger is that up until that last 2 minutes, the person feels fine. Once symptoms kick in, they proceed with terrifying speed.
James was in a race against time, and he knew emergency services would struggle to reach him.
The terrain is really steep and he's on quite a precarious position.
I just had to make the call, either keep climbing up and get myself out, or go back down. If I had gone back down, they would have had to carry me up.
With the help of fellow climbers, he continued to the top using just one arm. There, he lay flat, and a compression bandage was applied to his arm.
So you put it on no tighter than you would for a sprain. And then you immobilize the arm, because otherwise every time they move it, the venom's going to get pushed up a little bit more. So between the pressure and immobilization, you can stop the venom in its tracks. Like there's been cases where people have presented to hospital up to 7 hours after a snake bite, no symptoms. And then they take the bandage off. Within 10 to 15 minutes, the venom is slammed in to the person like a freight train. But during that 7-hour window, they were able to be transported from a remote area to hospital.
After a dose of antivenom, the rock climber made a full recovery with no obvious sign of his near-death experience. But not everyone's as lucky. Perth grandmother Janice Taylor didn't realise for several hours that she'd been bitten by a brown snake.
It felt like a sharp prick. I actually thought maybe a spider had got me or a bee. My head was spinning, my brain was spinning. I couldn't move my legs.
The venom was injected into her foot, but moved quickly through her body, thinning her blood.
quite dramatic signs of active bleeding into the soft tissues in the face and the scalp. That, to me, in an area that wasn't injured, suggests that she was very lucky to survive.
Janice was raced to hospital and treated with anti-venom, which saved her life. While anti-venom is effective, understanding snake behaviour could help to avoid a bite in the first place.
Yeah, it will stand its ground and it will bite you if you approach it. It's that simple, but it will not chase you. There's never been a single case of a brown snake traveling 5 meters around and trying to get a person. If you see a snake and if it's right next to you, just don't move. Just wait for the snake to move away. If you don't act like a predator, the snake is not going to feel threatened and it's not going to bite you.
The world's largest and fiercest reptile lives in the swamps and river systems of northern Australia.
They're the oldest predator on the planet. A few million years of evolution and they're almost unchanged. So they're doing something right. For me, they're a very, very nasty threat.
They are right at the top of the food chain. They're right at the top of almost any food chain. So they have no fear because once they're adults, there's nothing else that's going to eat them.
I'd certainly take my chance with a shark over a croc any day because you don't expect to see a great white in a swimming pool, but you could have a 4.5 metre crocodile sitting in the bottom of a waterhole.
Males have been known to grow up to more than 6 metres long and weigh the same as a small car. Australia's population of these powerful predators is estimated to be around 200,000.
They're everywhere. People throw caution to the wind and do some stupid things.
On average, one person a year is killed by crocodiles in Australia, but the reptiles are believed to be responsible for many more deaths, their victims disappearing without a trace. Elston Lamy Lamy went close to becoming one of those statistics when he stood on a sleeping croc in a creek while hunting in Arnhem Land. The reptile latched onto his leg.
3 times I punched it and last one I hammered it right on the nose. That's when he let me go. I ran for my life.
Most crocodile attacks that occur from, say, a crocodile over 2.5 metres are usually fatal. It's of course, a big croc, 3 metres, forget it, because they're just such powerful animals.
Rob Bredel has spent his life educating people about crocs.
I can get away with what I do with these creatures because they are so instinctive, as in they're almost totally predictable.
But all his years of experience didn't stop him making an almost fatal mistake when feeding at his remote animal park.
That's the meat between the 2 teeth on the bottom. And normally I'd close his eyes or just flick it out with a piece. He just bit through my hand. Of course, whoops, I knew what happened then. And I knew that they'd go for another bite. And when he goes for the next bite, I was going to take it out, but I think those 2 teeth that went through the bottom were hooked in too tight. So when I pulled back, I must have pulled against them and didn't get it out. And he lunged forward and he got me higher. And then he started to back off into the water. Now, he's 650 kilos, I'm only 80, so I ain't going to win a tug of war.
When a crocodile closes his jaws, that pressure that he puts down on you is very similar to the pressure that you would feel if you were an adult walking down the road and you got hit by a car traveling at 50, 60 kilometers per hour. But the big difference is the car hits you and then it's done. The crocodile will clamp down on you with this huge pressure, and then he will hold that pressure and, in fact, if anything, keep increasing it as he drags you back into the water.
Then he just went into the roll, and as he went to the roll, I heard it. I was actually looking, I could see the hand starting to tear off. Next thing I look, I just see this big head come over and bite on my leg, and I said to myself, I thought, expletive, you know, this is not good. And then he lets go. Zeb had his big stick in, he shoved it down his throat.
Rob's nephew had witnessed the attack and rushed to the rescue.
I think he was actually thinking he was fighting another male crocodile. I actually pushed him off and then it gave me time to grab onto Robert there and help him get up out of the water. Because we ended up in the pond there with him.
Rob was free, but the force of the bite had dislocated every bone in his wrist. And he is still considered one of the lucky ones.
The saltwater crocodile will actively hunt and want to eat you, and it will stalk you.
Todd Bairstow thought he'd found the perfect fishing spot at a waterhole in far north Queensland. But he was not alone. Hiding underwater was a calculating killer.
Saltwater crocodiles are an ambush predator. So they will wait, see an established pattern, and act on that. And they'll get closer and closer.
With no warning, the 3-metre crocodile launched itself out of the water and grabbed the mine worker's legs.
I ended up facing him like this on the mud, on the ears in the water, with just his snout sticking out. Get on both my legs, just growling like that. He just growling at me. And I'm like, this is it, he's gonna pull me in. And I realised I had to get that bloody hand out, or I ended up croc shit. So I started just yanking this one as hard as I could. Managed to pull it off, pull it free, but at the same time I pulled my finger off. But what's the finger?
But it was only the start of what would turn into a 30-minute battle to save himself.
Oh, once it grabs hold of you, they will roll with such ferocity and torque that limbs are broken. And of course, it's just going to take you under the water and drown you. That's the primary role, to take any kick out of something. And it's very, very fast. You're talking about something very large. It's incredibly strong. Not afraid of a lot either.
Next one, bang! That's when he just spanned and broke my first leg. And he just rolled and he just popped my other leg. Oh.
But Todd wasn't going down without a fight. With one hand, he clung onto a mangrove root to stop himself from going under. He used the other to throw his dog into the water to distract the croc, but the 300-kilogram reptile refused to let go.
That's the next moment we had both my legs from this hole in there. Yelling out, "Croc! Croc! Somebody help! Croc! He's got me, I'm gonna die!"
Todd's mate Kevin arrived quickly to help.
And Kev ran down there, he grabbed one in my hand, he pulled me up, and the croc's still having my leg.
I was actually a bit scared on how hard you actually pull a person when there's a crocodile hanging on him. So I just kept a weight against him, and he was lashed around my leg, and then he came free, and I sort of stepped back and dragged him like that, and I saw a big swell behind him, and that's why I thought, let's get him out of here quick, and me.
Kevin's disregard for his own safety earned him a bravery award. And for Todd, there were multiple surgeries before he could walk again.
Any waterway up north, saltwater crocs live in both fresh water and salt water. You need to assume that every waterway has a crocodile in it. If you are fishing or something like that, put an obstacle between you and the bank. Say the buttress of a route or steep banks. Don't camp within 50 metres of a waterhole. Blasé nature that sort of gets people into trouble in the first place.
Your best defence against a crocodile is not letting him grab you in the first place. But if a crocodile did get hold of you, in the water, there's not much you can do once he goes into that death roll, because you've got no control over your limbs. But if you are on land and a crocodile is dragging you into the water, the one weak spot on that crocodile is going to be his eyes.
For these survivors, their battles in the bush have not tarnished their love of nature or their enthusiasm for life.
Yeah, I'm fighting fit. Pretty much, yeah, doing about 99% of what I was doing before. I don't go fish off the bank anymore. Brought a boat.
Well, I think you do have these impossible stories that do happen and I've luckily become one of them.
Well, we've got each other. And a strong family that's helped us out through everything.
We've been a pretty good team.
If you want to hang on to the worst, that's up to you. If you want to brush it aside, start talking about it. It worked for me.
My choice is look at it in a positive light and sure, have your emotional lows and go to those dark places, but make sure at the end of the day when you go to bed that the last thing you're thinking is, how bloody lucky am I and how great is the world.
We need more people to experience a little bit of adversity, but to do it safely, we need to understand where we're going. So you prepare for the worst and you hope for the best. Enjoy our lovely country and what it has to offer.